welcome today back to MiND Stim. I have an amazing guest, someone who I've known for about a year.
Yeah, done that.
We've had a bit of a kinship over different things. You're one of those people that always gives me a message of support when things are crumbling. I'd love to explore some of your work. You are brilliant at marketing, and
Thank you.
you are going back to university. I thought that we were recording today Pacific Standard Time and you're on the East Coast. It's just because Jill is such a fan of hardcore West Coast rap. You actually are from Compton, aren't you, Jill?
Actually, I was born right outside of Inglewood. It's a little suburb
Okay.
called Torrance. I was born in a Catholic hospital, which coincides with my Catholic upbringing. But when my mom was giving birth to me, I'm her only child, she almost died on the table. And so did I. But miraculously, I was born not crying. She said I made the nuns cry. She told me that story, and she also told my husband that story. I don't know how many times. I was born right outside Inglewood, I guess is where a lot of 90s rap was born. I know a little bit about it. I am from SoCal, but I'm actually a metalhead.
Oh my God, we're going to have a lot to talk about today. I think you're going to have to cancel your trip. You're going on a trip to Hawaii, and I have a Hawaiian shirt on. I'm very jealous. You mentioned Inglewood, and I was about to drop some Snoop Dogg, and then you was just like, "Yeah, I was born in a Catholic hospital." I was not expecting that. Just a different image than what I was expecting. You said you were born silent. That's a bit of a worrying sign, or was you just super obedient even at a young age?
I was born with my eyes open, silent. I don't know if that's worrying. I know that it made the nuns cry. That's all I know. I wouldn't call me obedient. Definitely not that. I would call myself more of a chaotic good. I will do
I
anything
love
to
that.
do the right thing.
I've been doing this work for about a year and a half, and it's an exercise in imposter syndrome. You literally cannot be an expert in neurodivergence. But something happened with these episodes. This is the seventh one I've recorded. Right? Patterns started to emerge. It's not even a neurodivergent thing necessarily. There's a chaotic good side that I've attracted into my life. And that's something I have. I'm quite placid and laid back. But if there's an injustice, there's literally no stopping where I'll go to. So maybe that's what it was when you were born. Eyes open, you're already spotting all of the injustices in the world. And rightfully, the nun cried. It was a miracle.
Yes, I mean, I've never really talked about it in depth. It's just kind of a cool story that your parents tell you when you're young about you, and then anybody you bring home. In this case, it was my husband. We've been together since I was 14, so it makes sense. I've always been keen to, like you said, injustice, and it affects me deeply when there's an injustice either against me or someone that I know. So I often joke I have justice-flavored autism because I am not a math whiz. Actually, I hate math. I hate numbers in general, but I tend to lean into pattern recognition. It's a big thing with me. No matter how much I tried to mask it, that always stuck with me. So unmasking now and coming into my own, my sense of pattern recognition is a skill that I utilize on a daily basis. It's one of the reasons I'm going back to university. I'm going back to school to be a social worker. In the United States, the social worker ethics are actually quite political and very much on the left, which is where I am. I joke too that I'm a European leftist, too far left for most people in the United States. Like Bernie Sanders, only further left than him. I love him and I appreciate him. I voted for him when he was in
Feel
the
the burn.
primary, and
Is
yeah,
it Feel the Burn? Yeah.
I did. I felt the burn.
He was someone I was rooting for, not so much recently. 2016 was a watershed moment where the Democrat Party decided to court the middle. It's interesting because you said the political spectrum there, the left isn't really the left. Whilst we complain in the UK, well, there's a rude saying, there are two cheeks on the same arse, different in terms of ideology. Ultimately, they amount to the same. That separation in the US is not nearly as much. Bernie Sanders, maybe in the realm of Jeremy Corbyn in the UK. You saying you're a lefty in the US is quite significant, whereas I'm relatively moderate in the UK. You've got justice-flavored autism. There's a necessity to use words like flavored or more nuanced descriptions because actually the Rain Man depiction, you look at the math board and then immediately you're a rocket scientist, but it's not. It goes in so many different directions and not as good at spotting patterns as you. I tend to see broader themes, whether it's social. I can relate on different levels how they would perceive it more broadly in terms of systems and that level of nuance, it does get quite taxing. You're somebody who seems to be able to cut through. I wouldn't be surprised that's helped you with marketing. You have to spot patterns of behavior, of how what the reception of your work is. How is that played out in your life in general?
Just to preface, I have a degree in psychology. Recognizing patterns in both work and life has affected me significantly. I can spot a bad person from a mile away. I don't usually like to use the term bad person. I like to use the term person who just won't vibe with me. They only either have to say a few words, stand a certain way, or anything. It's not a judgment thing. It's just I'm noticing some things that I've noticed in previous people who I don't get along with. Politics is a huge part of who I am because it affects me. I'm a woman. I'm a queer person. I'm also neurodivergent. With a lot of the discourse going around about neurodivergent people, particularly in this administration, it's frightening. They depict us as a threat. We're really not. If you're going to call me a threat, then you're going to Dan Aykroyd and Anthony Hopkins a threat. Dan Aykroyd was a Ghostbuster and definitely saved the world more than once. Okay, I get it, but it's because they don't understand. Like all of humanity, they approach what they don't understand with fear. That's the problem that we face in the United States and the world in general. More and more neurodiverse people are being diagnosed because the research has changed. The tables are turning. People are going, wait a minute, I might be, and even in a scary time to be diagnosed, it's worth it to be diagnosed. To circle around to your question, pattern recognition in work. As a marketer, definitely. My boss told me, it was my indirect supervisor. Shout out to Ryan. Love you, buddy. He values my opinion because I have a way of seeing through. Like you said, I see the gray and the nuance, which a lot of people think that we don't. Autism and ADHD are a spectrum. Not everybody is going to fit your mold of what autism and ADHD look like. So my mom, when I was growing up, she owned a bar. I got to watch her socialize. She taught me a lot just by doing that. Because you have to be social and charismatic and outgoing in order to be successful in that profession. You're dealing with people who might be inebriated. So you have to have a situational awareness. And I learned those things. It built my mask. It also taught me certain things like sarcasm. So nobody would have known if I wasn't diagnosed just 6 years ago. That's usually a marker. You don't understand things like sarcasm and different social nuances, maybe flirting. I understood those things because I watched them in real time. My pattern recognition kicked in and went, that's what that is. Pattern recognition for me plays a part in identifying social nuance.
First of all, you're talking intersectionality, the different aspects of your identity. That's important. I was trying to explain he's actually a guest on, I think, the second or third episode. He supports many autistic people. He has a brilliant company. Every gym has times in the day where no one's there. He was like, well, why don't we set a company up where we give autistic folk the training in those dead spots so they can just be more focused on the fact that you have to find a dead spot to accommodate is a bit of an issue, but it's an amazing cause. He was talking to me about race and understood intersectionality, how my upbringing, I guess, with lower socioeconomic background, being mixed race. It's thankful because it showed a level of awareness. He was trying to work out why we were still so connected. On the face of it, he's, I guess, the classic class middle-aged white guy. That's one intersectionality, is we both have ADHD. Again, it's a spectrum. So we've got the typical hyper-focus, high impulsivity. That's such a prevailing intersectionality. It's a prevailing experience. If you look now, especially in the Western world, the difference in social classes beyond the point of becoming more blurred. We've probably got more in common than we do Elon Musk or Donald Trump. To still recognize that, I just thought shows a level of awareness. We've spoken about race many times. You're talking about those various intersectionalities and your political that really drives your life. It's a really important point. When people become critical of this constant political noise, I get it. I'm a human being, so I understand both sides. I understand if you're trying to get through your day, you mind your own business and it's constant and it's very divisive. What I try to say to those people is, I don't like using the word privilege, but it's probably the best term of that. There is a certain privilege of not needing to be political. Not to say politics doesn't impact everyone, it does, but some people have a certain level of safety, whether that's being a part of a majority or their socioeconomic background is such they can isolate themselves. When I started Newbie, what people don't know about me is that I I was actually let go at the worst time in the job market in 15 years, 20 years. Because I mask so much and believe in this idea of self-sufficiency and martyrdom, I didn't ask for help. I don't want to say I was discriminated against, but I was. I'm getting used to being okay with saying that. Like you said, I don't want to say bad people, but I get what you meant. I got into this work as a necessity, as something I had to put every last fiber of my being into. To start a business is really difficult. When you have ADHD, it's like being on a unicycle on a tightrope and then juggling at the same time. Politics is important to certain people because it's their very means of advocating for themselves, the injustices of other people that they've with that amazing pattern recognition spotted. They don't have the luxury of it not impacting them. I spoke to you a while back when I think it was right at the peak of when Donald Trump came in. I don't want to get political in a partisan sense, but there was a lot of rhetoric that came off the back of that, and it was quite depressing. We chatted about it briefly.
I did.
It's acute where you are. It's acutely impacting LGBT folk. It's impacting neurodivergent folk, immigrants, anyone who knows an immigrant. What I found interesting with you is you're able to spot all of that. I understand with your psychology background that plays a part. When you talked about autism, it is a spectrum of many, like one of those spider charts. Loads of autistic folk that I speak to are brilliant with social cues. It's not that they're not good with them, it's that society hasn't recognized their version of what that looks like. You have to conform to what being social looks like, and most of it's nonsense. You've got people that are nonverbal, some are not. Some people on that edge of emotional dysregulation, some that are not, some are routine driven. The reality is, if you look at the history of autism, it's patchy at best. Don't get me started with the DSM. You've got Asperger's, which has a bleak history, but then you've got what they would call classic autism. There isn't a continuity. There's a lot of things that haven't been integrated, and we need to update our language. But people's perception is still out of date and reflective of those older views. My worry is that it's the single biggest thing hindering the support. And so somebody like yourself to articulate it in a way that I often can't is more what's needed than all this, we're superheroes, that thing, which
That
I'm
drives
kind
me
of getting
nuts.
away from. After that incredibly long monologue, what is it you see that other people don't see? What's that kind of single message that you'd want to give?
This is going to be a toughie. First of all, when you're thinking along a spectrum, most people envision like a timeline when the spectrum's actually a circle.
100%.
I'm not the type of autistic that is going to meet all of somebody's specific criteria for being autistic. Everybody has an idea of what it looks like, whether like they see it in the media or hear about it from like a friend or have like an autistic kid in their school that maybe is nonverbal, or like we're all over the place. My singular message is that an autistic person is still a human being, whether or not you think they don't understand what you're saying or doing when you have not so great intentions. We eventually do. That naivety doesn't last forever. We learn from it, and that becomes part of the pattern recognition that we have. When talking to people about autism and who I am, I always get the whole, you don't look autistic. I'm like, well, you don't look very smart, but here we are. It's
This is what
like,
I think and never say. I'm so
exactly,
glad you
but
do.
I do. I say it because I don't care. All of their perceptions are what played a part in my late diagnosis. And so I try to bring forth the fact that I'm not like you. In fact, it actually took my son being diagnosed for me to get diagnosed because his therapist was with us in a couple of sessions. She pulls me aside after one of them and she goes, so, I don't want to overstep my bounds here, but you and your son are basically the same person. Have you thought about being evaluated? And I was like, what? No. At the time, I'm sitting here going, autism is bad. I'm going to need so much, blah, blah, blah. I wound up taking her advice a few months later and being evaluated. And yes, very much on the spectrum, more so than I thought. I had a higher score than I imagined I would. And it was a shock. And it was something that because of all the stigma surrounding it that I had to come to terms with it. I struggled with it. I may be proud now, but that wasn't always the case. I had to come to terms with the fact that I wasn't really who I thought I was, even though I'd been this person my entire life. Here I am, 31 years old at the time, going, oh my gosh, I'm autistic? What? It all makes sense too, right? I started to think about the things that I liked as a kid. You know, for example, every one of my stuffed animals had a name and a personality. I was in my own little world all the time. I was quote unquote more mature than most of my friends. I was the pleasure to have in class and the kid that everybody cheated off of because, again, there's that pattern recognition with schoolwork. It affects your whole life. I got made fun of for being too mature. Part of my mask I developed was be like everybody else, you know, fit in. I wish I could go back to my younger self 30 years ago almost and say, you know, you don't have to be like them. You're going to be just fine. You're not always going to be a doormat. You're not always going to want to please everyone. And pretty soon you're just not going to give a shit. That is and that is something a lot of us experience when we talk about the collective experience of being a late diagnosed neurodivergent, particularly a woman. We take off the mask and we're like, you know what? If you don't like us, fine. And a lot of us struggle growing up too with making friends that are girls. A lot of my friends were guys. When I was in middle and high school, I was
I
the
was the
quote
opposite.
unquote, yeah, well, no. I was the school slut because I had to be sleeping with every guy I was friends with, which
I'm laughing
total
because
bull.
what was the world like, man? I mean, we're similar ages, and people think there's not a big difference. Oh my God, was there a big difference in the 90s? In my upbringing, it was that's gay, that's gay, that's gay. Like I'm so anti those reductive ways. It's children, I get it, but it comes from parents, it comes from society. But it perpetuates this idea of a conformity to a very narrow norm. When you're neurodivergent, you become a minority in your own world. I keep saying the same thing, so I'm going to try not to repeat it. If I was a minority, I was going to say incompetent, I guess, is quite segregated to a degree, is it?
I didn't live there long enough to really get the feel for the area. From what I understand, there are large Black communities there. Their culture, believe it or not, I love it. A lot of our music comes from the Black community, not just rap, jazz, blues, rock and
Oh,
roll.
you are a genius.
I'm a curious person. You saying we're the same person, that might be why I get so pissed at you for self-deprecating all the time. Like, stop
Yeah,
that
because
shit.
you've got that empathy really deep rooted in you, a tendency to be able to relate to a lot of people. Jill could easily come and be a guest host. When I started Newbie, I think we just crossed paths on LinkedIn. I did actually ask,
We
I'm
did.
sure, advice, to Jill about a number of things, especially autism. Because whilst I don't talk about it because I'm still kind of trying to reconcile with that diagnosis, what Jill said was really poignant. It isn't like you just accept it. It becomes something you have to integrate. I actually scored the perfect score, and they did the family history, all of that. And they said, yeah, you're autistic. With ADHD, it was a vehicle to get medication and support that was very specific. With autism, it's more around the identity. I don't like using high function, low function. That's an awful thing. I didn't have the classic challenges that some people have, which vary wildly. I'm still working through it, but you spotted that in me. I don't actually talk about it, but that's what I was diagnosed with. It's still quite broad because autism spectrum disorder is a bit like saying to someone, you're one of 100 million things. It's not an endpoint, it's a start of the discovery process.
You're not even
But what
one. You're like a million different things, right? You don't fit a mold that anybody puts you in. Sorry to cut in, but you're not a cookie cutter. You are a unique individual with they call it a disorder, but I would just say that
oh,
you're on the spectrum. Okay, you're one individual who is on a spectrum of many individuals on that spectrum. Once you reconcile that and you recognize that you are just you're on a spectrum and that you don't have to define yourself in a way that makes
mm,
you look or think or speak autistic in order to validate that to other people, it becomes so much more freeing. That is something that I had to learn over the past 6 years. So if you're doing math, I was diagnosed at 31. I'm 37. I turned 37 in March. Overall, I find my diagnosis to be super freeing now just because I understand so much more of what I struggled with and what I still struggle with and what I want to help others overcome in their path. That's why I'm choosing social work, because here in the States, you can be a licensed clinical social worker therapist, and the ethics are different. My first degree is in psychology, and I'm still going to minor in psychology. I do plan on moving overseas at some point. I fell in love with your part of the world after visiting it. It's also what drives my political beliefs. I'll get into that later.
everyone I speak to from the States is a bit of an Anglophile. I'm sure that there are many people that are the opposite in the States, but it is something is picked up in the wind. I was going to touch into your late diagnosis. My friend put it double empathy, for instance, where it's very clear that somebody has completely been unjust towards me. Most people would say, how are you even putting up with that? But in my language, I'm still talking about the impact on them when it's not reciprocated. It ties in with the late diagnosis. We grew up in a time where the depictions of autism were quite very much a caricature. And it wasn't just autism, it was LGBT concerns and rights. The language around most things was quite restrictive. I think that internalized, I don't want to even say shame. You just don't have a way of finding your place within a broader society. When you're 6 or 7 and you don't know what autism is, no one does in your whole class, and most of their parents don't. You probably have it. Again, have it is another term I'm not really keen on. It's not the common cold. We spoke just before I came on the podcast where my negative self-talk is consistent. And it's either internal or with people like yourself who I can trust. I say it out loud. If somebody's been newly diagnosed, they're still trying to work out their own sense of internal shame, let alone where they even fit, because broadly speaking, there's elements of their personality or the way they think that hasn't quite conformed to everyone else. There's already a pre-packaged depiction that separates them from being an individual. If I say to you, Jill, okay, you're diagnosed autism spectrum disorder, and then we go, all right, Jill, that's it. Everything that I think about you, you're just autistic. I'm not going to ask you about what your favorite color is. I'm not going to ask you about your music, if you like to cosplay at Comic-Con and tarot. It's just autism spectrum disorder. The medical model is important because it's what allows people to get support that's necessary. And some people really have profound challenges that without medical intervention, they struggle. But we shouldn't be lazy and complacent in the notion that society in any other walk of life doesn't make up the largest part of someone's experience. If we're just like, oh, someone autistic is coming into the company and that's it. We're not going to ask questions. We're not going to try to peer behind the corner of what that looks like. We'll just hermetically seal that off from the world and look at it as this one dimension. That's where people struggle the most and where the stigma comes from. So paradoxically, whilst a lot of the DEI efforts is very softy, you can be very respectful and make a concerted effort not to offend someone. But it's not the same as what you actually need to do, which is wrestle with their experience. If you don't know much, you ask questions, but don't be afraid to just get involved. It's universal. The biggest thing people have been frustrated with the most is assumptions, as opposed to somebody maybe mildly offending someone. If we were talking about autism or ADHD and I used a term or I misspoke and said something that wasn't quite accurate, you would just correct me and move on. I'm going to let you speak for the rest of the pod now.
That's okay.
You've got the late diagnose aspect, but there is obviously in a lot of the medical field, a lot of discrepancy in diagnosis across the gender divide. How does that play out for you?
I took my son's diagnosis for anybody to recognize my own. So that's step number 1. Most of the research that we have on autism, actually all of it, is based on males. We're just now trying to break into researching female presentation of autism and ADHD. I was diagnosed as a level 1 autistic because we don't use Asperger's anymore in the DSM-5. And for obvious reasons, he was a war criminal. Well, I have combined presentation ADHD, which they have assumed that inattentive ADHD is the norm for women, for girls. The reality is more of us are combined. I don't want to leave ADHD completely off the table because it definitely plays into who I am with the autism. In fact, the first time I was ever medicated for ADHD, my husband looked at me and goes, wow, I see the autism. Because I guess I just mellowed out and was a different person, but a little more linear. You can't medicate autism, not in the ways that will fix autism, right? You can medicate the anxiety, you can medicate the depression, but you can't medicate autism. Autism is the way that your brain is structured. It is the way that your neurons fire. It is the amount of gray matter in your brain. You cannot take that away. Like, you can medicate impulsivity. I guess you can medicate intrusive thoughts. A lot of people have OCD as a comorbidity with autism. And so, my daughter is one of them. I have 3 children. All 3 are very neurospicy. That's what I like to say is neurospicy, because we're spicy in the brain. Like on LinkedIn, for example, I've been a little bit more educational about autism and what it actually looks like, because I can present as a normie, I guess you can say. But then when I tell people I'm autistic, they're like, whoa, really? Oh, what's that like? And I'll get the occasional, you don't look autistic. And I'm like, really? Because I know that there are certain physical traits that come with it. What do you know about that? What does autism look like? Because I look you in the eye, I'm not autistic. Because I'm a little bit sarcastic, I'm not autistic. Because I am in tune with my emotions, I'm not autistic. Okay, but go off.
It's what you were touching on is something I feel you don't want to be the person who someone says, you're high functioning though, you're not. It makes me
God, I
feel almost guilt. It's like you feel guilty. I'm so sorry that I'm a high function. It's not the point. It's like a paradox. You never want to design for just the medium experience, because in any system, the real people with the real challenges or those who will thrive, they will dictate how well a scheme or an approach will work. If you design a scheme and then somebody with sensory issues can't even be involved, or somebody who's using a form and they need multimodal input, that's important. So what we tend to do is look at the extremes. But the paradox is, then when you look at like Superman, ADHD versus completely inattentive, it's damaging, because those who are put up on that pedestal, and I get it sometimes where people go, you're high functional, not understanding how much masking is involved because society hasn't really adapted to my way of thinking. I also feel this awful sense of responsibility that you don't overlook people that are struggling. I don't want people to equate struggling with value. Somebody can be nonverbal, have profound challenges, and have some of the best insights. We have many ways of communicating. We have many ways of learning.
We do.
We've barely untethered those in the education system, in work for the average persons. My school was literally the worst, pretty much. Knife crime, all the rest of it. So there's violence, noise around me. Teachers are making do, really.
Yeah.
So nobody got taught properly. But that was quite common in the curriculum. There isn't a lot of focus on learning by doing, kinesthetic learning, I guess. So I'm somebody that needs a little bit of all of it. The worst way I could learn is someone dictating it to me. It needs to be tactile. I need to have
Hands on.
repetition. Is that necessarily neurodivergent? Well, to a degree, some of the things can skew that way, but I've spoken to people that are neurotypical, and they also are being left behind in it. There's no shortcuts. If you want to be complacent and not grapple with the complexity of it, that's fine, but you're missing out on talent. You're also part of the problem. I'm okay saying that now, because the reality is, and you probably experienced it yourself, discrimination thrives in that environment. I think you said chaotic good. I spent a lot of my life being that conscientious objector. Part of me getting from that point of shame and then recontextualizing my entire life and people not necessarily understanding me to here was turning it into a way of championing other people. That's where I'm at now. We have a lot of amazing potential, but it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Progress. You say about the gender discrepancies. I was kind of weirdly in the reverse. So let's be honest, there's a reason why 4-to-1 boys or blokes are diagnosed. It's because it's only boys in the scientific literature. And the old depictions of that was the hyperactive. ADHD is a misnomer because it talks about the hyperactivity, which is only one aspect. It uses the word deficit and disorder. It's double negative. It doesn't talk about the inattentive, the impulsivity, emotional dysregulation, which is a lot of it is environmental. It simply is an outdated term. OCD is another one, which is a bit frustrating because people only focus on the compulsions, not what's behind them. But I think
Trust me.
that's the reality. In terms of you said
Here in the States, it's a battery of tests that you do with a therapist or a proctor who is monitoring you and your responses. And it feels longer than it actually is. You also have to wait like a month or 2 months for your results, because the wait lists here are just diabolical. I've heard 6 months to a year long wait to even be evaluated, never mind the support that you need. And not everybody wants ABA therapy. I personally don't want it. I don't see the benefit in trying to blend in. I want to be a standout, right? I recognize too that while that may be my view, somebody who's lower on the spectrum than me might need ABA. If, for example, if they're nonverbal, if they have a little bit harder of a time on the developmental side. I'm more on the learning disability with a little bit of the developmental challenges, right? Because even though I walked early and talked early, I definitely didn't understand certain things or as early as I did. So, like social cues and things like that. There was a little bit of give and take for me, but I have a nephew who is nonverbal. So for him, life looks a lot different. He has more accommodations at school. He can wear his headphones all the time. He can't communicate with us verbally, but he can communicate in other ways, but he still understands the world around him, regardless of whether or not he can communicate. Different modalities of therapy exist for different parts of the spectrum, but also for different needs. And that's okay. I want to touch on the high functioning part. I hate that term. I hate it with a passion. And the
Awful.
reason why is because 90% of the time people look at you and go, oh, you're high functioning, you're good. As in, you're high functioning, you don't need any help. Bullshit. Do you realize how hard this is and what it does not only to me psychologically, but physically? I'm currently being evaluated for health issues as a result of masking for so long. You don't get to tell me that what I'm doing is the right thing when obviously my body thinks differently. Society forces us into a corner that eventually affects us in all ways, mentally, physically. I can say the same thing for corporate cultures. They're not built for people like me and you.
Of course
We
they're
need
not.
a certain type of flexibility in a work environment because we're great. We're wonderful. We're an asset to any company, right? But if you have a culture that is toxic, we're going to be the first to point it out. We're going to be the first to tell you, and you're not going to want to hear it. And then you're going to be like, oh, well, you don't fit in here culturally. And I think that's what personality tests do, is weed us out. Correct me if I'm wrong. This might be a bit of a bold statement, but personality tests are looking for a correct personality for their team, and we never fit. We do not fit the
Can I
mold.
just? I'm going to get a lot of flack for this. I'm just going to say it. There is a kind of a cottage industry of people that like to sell wisdom by being affiliated to Myers-Briggs and other modalities, so they can teach their coaching courses. It's a bit of a pyramid scheme, kind of MLM bullshit, really. First of all, it's incredibly simplistic. It is not variant at all. We were talking about ADHD alone. ADHD is not who I am. That's one aspect of me. And that alone, you've seen me hyper-focused. I bet you've seen me impulsive. You've seen me have emotional dysregulation. You've seen me really confident. I'm all of that. And that's what this podcast hopefully shows. I looked back at the last episode, and only on that day did I have the thing where I have an eye contact issue, nystagmus it's called. So my eyes just can't track. This doesn't mean that I can't keep eye contact. That's the level of stress I was under that day. They're a way of justifying a type A personality usually. And what I've noticed, there's a parallel between good leadership and inclusivity, and the opposite is true. Good leadership actually, ironically, reflects a lot of the traits people say are good in autism, which is people that are consistent without being stereotypical with the communication. They do what they say they will do. It's not big displays of charisma. It's being so consistent that people no longer wait their turn to be proactive or stand up for someone. They feel they're valued and will be met with encouragement. The opposite is a conformity and compliance method, which is basically hit you with a rod. If I keep this norm very narrow in terms of this is how you send outreach, don't tell me how to send outreach. I don't give a shit if you say, I hope you're well. People have such variation on culture, in background, experience. Don't tell me there's a red flag for how to speak to other humans, please, because this perpetuates the stuff that isolates many people, not just neurodivergent. It's basically a clever ploy of creating a conventional wisdom. Some people can sell their advice as if it's not arbitrary. Others can keep you conformed so they don't have to necessarily be leaders that inspire through action. They can do it through force and compliance. But the average person is conforming. They don't realize they're masking. It doesn't impact them as much because whilst they are going to work, commuting, it would be better to work from home. They don't have 17 years of insomnia like me. But they're still tired. They're still missing their kids grow up. When is that threshold that they will act to? All of these modalities, Myers-Briggs and all of that, they're built on a behavioral science that isn't remotely conclusive. It doesn't integrate many perspectives outside of the Western one. Corporate culture has been brought up over the last 30 years in all of the books and nonsense really around that. I've seen people be discriminated against because of not wanting to put their camera on initially on a call. Okay, Why is it that that person always puts the camera on with me? Not that I expect it, by the way. For some, there's a certain level of trust and psychological safety that they need. Why wouldn't you try and engender that instead of label that person? Some of the words that people use, saying someone's defective or they don't have initiative. No, you didn't have clear enough messaging. They didn't trust you because you're a terrible leader. I think we need to dismantle those perspectives completely, because it's not benefiting anyone. If a team has more perspectives, you tend to arrive at a solution that is not only more efficient, but reflects society as it is, not what some leader wants it to be,
Agreed. And I argue too that any accommodation that an autistic person asks for should be the norm in a culture. For example, if they ask for a specific type of communication, I personally have asked for written communication because I have auditory processing disorder. So for me, it's very hard to just take verbal instructions and run. I have to have a breakdown. Sometimes I use an AI note taker for this, but other times I'm like, hey, if I haven't done this before, I need written instructions. I need to know what your expectations are. In the corporate world, you are constantly trying to fulfill expectation. That's very hard for an autistic person because our whole life being brought up, we could never fulfill anyone's because, and if we did, it took a lot of effort that not a lot of people had to put that much, like not everybody else had to put that much effort into. It takes a lot out of us. I can tell you at the end of my workday, I'm drained because even though I work remote and from home, there's still a lot of things that I have to do and a lot of expectations that I have to fulfill. So I'm spending my whole time surviving, but we also need that ability to completely step away and log off, right? Because we need that separation because it feels like torture when work becomes your entire personality. I don't speak for everybody on the spectrum, just a disclaimer. I speak on my experience and my experience alone. I need clear-cut boundaries and I need
Same.
okay, I'm at work. When I'm at work, when I'm off, I'm off. Like, you leave me alone. I cannot do weekends. I cannot do holidays. I also recognize that sometimes I take more time off than most other people, but I come back super refreshed and creative. I can't take stress the way an holistic person can. Or, or I choose not to. I
Which
know
is
what
more
my body
powerful.
can handle.
I, at the moment, work with multiple people that don't think about what my needs are. I'm a business owner, it comes with the territory. But I actually have like 10 different messaging apps. All of these things, by the way, are not even that accessible. There's already that impulsivity thing that comes with UX. Neurodivergent people actually do a lot of accommodating. We're probably experts at it because that's literally the definition of masking. Instead of accommodating one person, you're accommodating everything. Maybe people can learn a thing or two and realize it's really not this a race to the bottom. It's pretty reciprocal and it just hasn't yet been reciprocated. There's a lot I do in a day. If people realized how unbelievably challenging it is to have to all of these non-preferred means of communication and things that aren't my best skill set and time frame. I would never go back into the workplace now because I could never do a 9 to 5. It doesn't make sense. My focus is variable and yet I can get double the work done in 2 hours if you just give me 10 minutes to decompress.
Preach. That's my everyday life. Just like, I think it's pretty unrealistic to make everybody work nonstop for 8 hours straight because that's how you perpetuate burnout. Like, trust people to give you the results. Trust people, especially people like me, to get their work done because that's all that's on our minds when we get that work, especially overachievers or recovering overachievers. Like me, I joke that I'm your typical gifted burnout kid, right? Got straight A's in school, overachieved,
But
like
it's very similar,
yes. And
you and I.
yes. And that right there, right, is like, okay, well, some of that overachieving comes out in the workplace, but then you're like, okay, well, I got that done. What do I do for the next 4 hours? And everybody's like, well, innovate, do this, do that. That's unrealistic to do every single day. My brain doesn't operate that way. I need a break from just innovating and creativity. Because while I'm a highly creative person, sometimes I need just mind numbing stuff, right? Like admin work, maybe entering some data in a spreadsheet. I'm normally not a spreadsheet girl, but it's a nice break. Like the 8 hour, 5 day work week is outdated. And I know this is going to be really controversial, especially because I work in a company that's 8 hours a day, 9 to 5.
Don't let
It is.
controversy get in the way of the truth. You're right.
It is true. We're seeing it more and more.
It
More
is.
companies are scaling back to 32 hours a week. More people are saying, okay, well, I need a flexible schedule, and they find a company that gives you a flexible schedule. Luckily, on the team I'm on now, I have an extremely flexible schedule. They're wonderful about it. This is the best leadership I've ever had in my life. Ryan and Faith are amazing. I see a lot of different like linear, outdated things in the workplace in
Linear is the
particular,
word.
not just my org, but other orgs too, where I'm like, I could never do that. I can't do that. I don't fit that mold. But yet here I am still getting things done and showing everybody else there's a different way. You accommodate people by giving them this freedom of like, let them get it done. You want us to be in your bottom line. Sometimes that doesn't look like staring at my screen for 8 hours a day, guys. Sometimes that looks like 3 or 4 hours of deep work. A lot of cultures can learn from the neurodivergent way of work because I
Hugely.
believe truly from my heart of hearts that it's the future. We're already
Well,
seeing it.
it's 30% potentially more of the population. If every other aspect of the natural world is built on the idea of diversity, biodiversity, we just don't really understand diversity of thinking, when in fact that's what has allowed every species to progress across the natural world. You can look at it in so many levels. On a human level, it's a wasted potential. Some autistic folk that are in my network who say to me, if I don't have that thing that drives purpose, that's when I struggle. So it can be both ways. You need to decompress and do some mind-numbing thing like I do, but sometimes they're actually asking for more challenging work. That also gets thwarted in this 9 to 5 productivity myth culture, really. As a marketeer, you're probably more of an expert on ROI, but we seem to make a lot of vague statements about people's impact as if we're measuring ROI in a way that is that objective. In reality, it's way harder to do. It's easy to come to the conclusion that you want. But what I have seen, and I think you've got to trust your instinct, is there are moments in work when something happens where you have collaboration between people that would not usually see eye to eye, but they arrive at something that cannot happen without the both of them. And that usually is when you deviate from a process or when you integrate more perspectives. And those perspectives, in order for them to be utilized, the people with those perspectives need to be operating on what works for them. There is a practicality, or you have to think of ways to get everyone on the same page. It's a bit difficult sometimes, a hybrid. Some of the feats of ingenuity that the human race has achieved, and we can't work out how to support people that have different needs in terms of what time they clock into work. Really, it's the trust. And leaders, I see them too. They are masking in their own sense. People go through this process of 30 years where they had to do it. They want to have a race to the bottom. I was speaking to someone who said, I used to be up at 6 o'clock and we'd be on the train and we'd be out in the pub drunk until 12 and then we'd get up the next day. And I was like, yeah, how was that for you guys? Well, it's not great really, because I didn't see my family and I had a divorce. So do you not want a better future for the
Yeah,
rest
I
of
don't
us? You know?
understand that. Like here too, and I'll use the student loan, I call it an epidemic, the student loan epidemic as an example. Just because you had to pay back hundreds of thousands of dollars, Joe Biden was talking about forgiveness for people.
Forgive us, yeah.
And they were like, well, I had to pay it. You should too. And like, really, what does that do for us? A lot of people take these loans out when they're like 18. They're not reading the fine print, and companies are essentially taking advantage. Then you have this thing where, okay, now they've got their degree, they can't use it, especially in this job market. Oh my God, like talk about picky and broken. People can't even use their degree. All of a sudden they owe hundreds of thousands of dollars because somebody told them they needed to get a degree to do the thing, right? And they can't pay it back because they can't get a job in the thing that they wanted to do. No matter how hard they try, Biden recognized that we should start this process of just forgiveness. And overseas where you are, university is tuition free. And it's like, it's so
Not
unfair
anymore.
because even though, my God, well,
We've got the similar narrative, but I guess the difference is I think the loans are not nearly as exorbitant as they are in the US. The average healthcare is worse than a lot of what you can get in the US, but it's worse for everyone. For life-saving emergencies, you're not going to be homeless. Could cost the NHS £5 million to cure your cancer, and you'll get that. But it's just ill fit. It's over 70, 80 years old, and it was never there to factor in chronic illnesses and disease, aging population. When it comes to mental health in the UK, ultimately it's something that needs long-term intervention, and it's not necessarily medical intervention, it's support systems. And so they go just CBT, and there's not really a lot other than that. People slip through the cracks and don't get diagnosed until a lot later. It doesn't mean to say they're not struggling, they're just not suicidal or what is deemed enough of an emergency. There's people like me and some people that I've spoken to that literally had to get to that point where they were in order to be taken seriously. I had to be in the emergency room screaming at people, almost like you're cosplaying, help me, help me. Why do you think people actually do ask for help, scream for help? It's because people have ignored them. The emergency systems aren't designed to go through the nuances of neurodivergence. They will either prescribe you medication that is ill-suited, or you'll be treated for the secondary comorbidities. If you just were seen early on throughout the education system and in the media for what you are, you probably would have never had depression and anxieties. That's something maybe on another episode we could pick out. And I would love you to come back as a host.
Yeah, I would love to do this. I mean, when we first met, you talked about working together anyway, so
We're
I
going
mean, why
to,
not?
definitely. 100%. I was going to just ask you a few fun questions because what I wanted the audience to see is just how eclectic, and interesting you are. First of all, you're a gamer.
Yes.
Tell everyone about the kind of games you like playing. We still haven't got together and jumped on Steam yet, have we?
No, and we should. It depends on the day. I love turn-based strategy. I play a lot of Sid Meier's Civilization, particularly with my husband. Ask him, I kick his ass every time. I've played StarCraft with him, StarCraft 2. I was really big into MMORPGs for many years. I played World of Warcraft for like 20 years. So yes, we're going to age me a little bit. I prefer the Horde. Not a big Alliance fan. I play The Sims 4, but I'm also very big into survival horror. So Fallout 4 is a major favorite. I love Bethesda in all its glory, even though it's so buggy. I also
Still
play
is, isn't it?
Skyrim. Yes, I also play Skyrim. Skyrim is my nostalgic go-to when I'm feeling a little nostalgic. Survival horror all the way. 7 Days to Die is also another favorite, although I hate
Amazing
that.
game.
Yes, but
Terrifies
every
me when
time.
it comes to every 7 days. It terrifies me.
Well, you can adjust those settings. I'm a nerd and I love like moon phases and things like that. I set it to every 30 days because usually a full moon is every 28. So you should have more time. They've made it a lot harder in terms of like learning recipes, and you still kind of have to grind and get to that point so you can protect yourself from the oncoming onslaught.
You said you've been playing World of Warcraft for 20 years. Were you around when there's a couple of memes around it? There was the guy that just ruined Raid. What's his name? Is it Jeremiah or something like that? I can't remember. It was ages ago.
There's an achievement called Leroy Jenkins.
Leroy Jenkins is the one. Oh my God. I'm a
Yeah,
nerd, aren't I?
we all are. It's okay.
We're
Like
nerds.
that was a bad thing when I was younger, and that explains why a lot of my friends were males. I was very much into video games. Where for females, that seemed like, oh no, you can't be. Bullshit. I love my anime and my video games. Like, leave me alone.
Well,
You're
what
bad,
pisses
you're
me off
ugly.
is gatekeeping. The simplest way of putting things, whether or not you want to champion people, keeping is fundamentally what it's about. Someone saying, well, this isn't a hobby for a girl, or this isn't a hobby for a guy. What is the utility in that? It just makes it so much better in life when you can share a bit beyond your work and the basics. That passion you have, whether it's music, whether it's video games.
I still get the questions from men about my fandoms. They ask me the really pointed stuff that they don't ask each other. And like all of a sudden, if I don't know one answer, if I mix something up, all of a sudden I can't be a true fan. Like patriarchy, shut the fuck up.
I'm into music a lot. It's a
Oh
similar
my.
parallel when someone says, I didn't know you're high functioning. It's the same thing with music. When people say, oh, you've got great taste, and then they try and get me to be snobby about other music, I'm not jumping down that rabbit hole. If someone wants to listen to whatever Baby Shark, right? I don't care. There's no utility in comparing my taste to other people. I only want to share my excitement or share something that is a curiosity that maybe other people can derive excitement from. But however they relate to music. Music is one of those things that kind of parallels neurodivergence in that it's perception, but it contains a lot more. Western music, it's 12 notes, right? That's how people form a perception about a lot of their tastes. And yet you've got Eastern music. Some of it's drone music, some music's microtonal. And so just our perception of our taste is cultural and embedded in how we divide the octave. Or people that tend to have an eclectic music taste and are curious to have something that's just outside of their comfort, it very easily becomes something you're familiar with over time. When you learn from music and you learn from gaming and all these things, it might sound somewhat trivial, but you learn so much about people.
Yes, you do. And I don't know that my neurodivergence has exactly steered my interest in hobbies. I always like to find out about the human. What are you interested in? There's a cat. I like cats too. I'm a vocal trained for soprano, but I love metal, right? For the music I listen to. It's funny because I drive a white van. I drive a white Honda Odyssey and I live on a military installation. I will go to the gate looking like what I call Target Barbie. Target is a huge store in the United States. And I'm all like normie dressed, but I have absolute filth coming out of my speakers. And the cops just look at me like, and I'm like, what? Okay, I'll turn it down for you. But you learn a lot about somebody's inner workings because like maybe I dress a little normie, not today, but doesn't mean I like Taylor Swift. No offense to Taylor, she's great. I'm just not a big fan of her music. And
We're going to get the
so,
Swifties on you.
well, that's okay. They can be on me. My daughter is a Swiftie.
She's definitely not in my top 50. I do listen to Taylor Swift, but I think if you just proved the point, and I realized that my neurodivergence is linked to music, not necessarily a cause and effect, but the notion of someone pigeonholing me because they haven't tried to listen, frankly, is the same thing that I feel when it comes to neurodivergence. My whole life has been loosely defined by wanting to be like, there's more to me. That's a universal theme. I would never, if you said I like metal, go, okay, well, she doesn't like jazz. I would just see that as one aspect. I don't want it to be like the end of the journey. I was going to ask you in that case, what type of metal? Are we talking Metallica, Anthrax, Megadeth, or are we going every other subgenre?
What I like is a little heavier, although I will caveat that Nothing Else Matters by Metallica, the symphonic version, was mine and my husband's first dance at our wedding. It's
What an
awesome.
epic song.
Yes, exactly. I love how it says I love you without saying I love you. But I am more into Cradle of Filth.
Okay.
Which is a
That's
British
very
band.
heavy.
Yes. There's a band I love called Deadlands. Their lead singer is female and she's absolutely just epic. You have to hear her. I love In This Moment, another very powerful female-led metal band. I'm also a Japanese metal fan. I love baby metal. I saw them in 2019
I
before
love
the pandemic.
baby metal.
So
Me
do
too.
my husband and I went to a concert with them and a band called Avatar, which is Swedish clown metal, opened up for them and they were so good. The guy's voice was so dynamic. He could do it all. He could sing and he could scream. I've always wanted to learn to metal scream, and I'm actually starting to learn now at 37 years old how to do that.
If you do it correctly, because it's basically distortion in the back of your throat, you can do it in a way that doesn't ruin your voice. If you don't know how to do it and you try it,
it'll ruin you.
It will ruin you. Because I used to sing badly, but now I sing very badly because I tried to do that as many, as you do in your misspent youth. Any other genres of music?
I do like jazz. There's a newer jazz artist I love. She's kind of a fusion. Her name's Leve. I love the name especially because I'm a Norse pagan, and her
As you do.
Yes, her name is spelled Laufey, and Leve was a giant in Norse mythology. I love her music, and it's relatable but still very like soft. My son actually introduced me to her. Give her a try. You'll like her.
She's playing in Liverpool today. I might just jump on the train. So my jazz stuff is like just most of the audience are going to switch off a bit when I say this. The really obvious stuff like Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Dave Brubeck. I don't really listen to a lot of jazz now. It just reminded me, we were talking at the start about just jazz music in terms of Black culture. I just really want to kind of almost celebrate that. The history of popular music, from the Beatles, Rolling Stones, to Taylor Swift, to every genre we've spoken about, including metal, has its roots in the blues music, really all of its form in blues, which has roots all the way back to the African diaspora and slavery, Jim Crow, then jazz being pretty much one of the true American art forms. I think it's a masterpiece of music. Is also inherently a music that has Black history completely built into the foundation. It's almost a counterpoint to classical music in the Western sense. One is a little bit more on structured repetition, Western ideals from a European sensibility. And jazz, whilst you can't pigeonhole it, that's conceivably the point, that you've got improvisation, you've got harmonies that are textured and layered. And imagine being able to see the world from both of those perspectives. That's the goal, isn't it? That's what, for me, neurodivergence is. Both are valid, both add value to the world. Why not try and soak up both? So selfishly, that's what I do.
Yeah, so do I. I love learning about new cultures. Pasty white, we always complain that we don't have a culture. A lot of white supremacy took that away and said, no, you can't have that. We're rediscovering our roots and who we are. My father was Sicilian. Okay, he died in May. The whole side of my family is Sicilian. That's part of my culture. That's where I come from. I was raised partially in it before my grandparents passed away. You know, the food, and I have some of the recipes and things like that. I can make a mean red gravy.
You scolded me for saying nonna wrong, didn't you? I just come back from Sicily. I've been to Sardinia since. The food is the best food in the world, by far.
You don't say nonna. That's the
Italian.
Northern Italian. What is the word that you would use? My brain just
Mainland?
Mainland Italy. So like proper Italian is nonna. What I used to call my grandmother, and other Sicilians might balk at this, we called her nonna. With a U.
I mean, there is a difference. It's distinct.
There is. It is. And there's, well, when you hear the language spoken too, you can definitely hear the differences. Sicily's a dialect. It's not the same as proper Italian. So when my son was on his Duolingo learning proper Italian, I was like, that's not what I learned. I learned from my nonna.
What I picked up from Sicilian culture in the brief time I was there, food is important from a social way of enjoying people's company. But in the UK, your average Brit doesn't centre so much of their socializing around eating out yet. Everywhere I went, probably because it's hotter, everywhere people at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock having espressos and also multi-generational. I'm not going to say the N word. Well, not that N word, nonna, I was going to say, but I mispronounced it and now offended everyone at the same time. But, you know, the grandparents were there, the aunts, the kids. It just felt there was an ease and the real celebration of life. But food-wise, I'm just trying to think of like the best food. Obviously, the cannoli, I almost made a Godfather joke and then stopped myself when I was out there because I was like,
God,
perhaps don't just go around like talking about the mafia, because we went to the anti-mafia tour. They show you all the hidden sites, and they even showed us the hills where a lot of the mafia would have lived. But then the other side of the tour was the amazing religious history. You know, the statues of, I think it's Santa Rosalia and Santa Maria, all these ornate statues of saints. Do you remember
deeply
those?
Catholic.
Everywhere you go.
I haven't been to Sicily proper. I wish I had. I know I still have family there. So if like you're there and you think you're my family, you probably are. Yes, my family was deeply Catholic, especially on that side. My mom's mom was Baptist, but my mom wasn't. She didn't go to church. I was the one that went with family. Every time my nonna would have to find something, she would invoke, who was it? The saint of finding things. I even remember. I recalled those little things. For my father's last rites, I was able to recite it with the priest. It's a lot of recitation, but there's also a lot of culture attached. But also, I remember that Catholicism colonized and harmed peoples. So I stepped away from it. But that doesn't negate the history of Catholicism and how it shaped communities for good or bad. I call Catholicism the witchiest religion there is just because of the ritual.
Yeah.
But it was also very harmful to me growing up.
Right.
Because I was bisexual at the time. It's funny, in their laws, the first person you like sleep with, you're married to, in God's eyes, thankfully that's my husband, but for other people that's harmful again. A lot of the views are just so, they don't fit me. Maybe they fit somebody else. I'm not trying to tell you like if you're Catholic, you're a terrible person. I'm just saying that I've personally been harmed by a lot of Christian religions, different Christian peoples. It's not for me. And that's okay.
I'm not one to really be anti-religion is the way I live, but I'm not religious at all. I'm
not either.
an atheist. And it's when it becomes dogma and then an organized institution, and then beyond that, when it starts to remove the separation of state, you can have a circular argument and just say, well, God works in mysterious ways. Anything that can do that without there being a standard which transcends that, or it's human rights, everyone's equal, everyone's expression is valid. Those are things that you need to instill in society, and that's where I have an issue with it. But equally, when I'm walking around a place like Sicily, if you think of, for instance, the Crusades or how Catholicism or colonialism, we just look at one slice, and then you go to another slice, and there's a different form of it. There is just too much history to draw one conclusion. If you look at just the majesty of it, and clearly people revered something, so there is a respect that you have regardless. I took that from it, and from a historical perspective. And interestingly, with Sicily, there was a Muslim caliphate that was part of the history. You could see they have these gates, and they look really ancient, and you could tell that there was an Arabic influence, but then there's Norman and Byzantine. So I'm just an absolute nerd.
Right. And a lot of Sicilian people, when they used to take those DNA tests, when that was really popular, they would find that if they had Sicilian roots, that a lot of them had Middle Eastern ancestry. In that area, everybody's from all over, and there's so much influence in the Mediterranean in particular. It's such a melting pot that nobody really talks about it, because they always call America the melting pot. We talk about ourselves in the West like there's so many different cultures, blah, 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 but we really emphasize whiteness here. I feel like we took a lot of Europe with us, even when we like tried to leave it. We also emphasize patriarchy. It's why we've never had a woman leader. We're also still a really young country. We've never had a woman leader because everybody's stuck in internalized misogyny, patriarchy, toxic masculinity, all of it. It also bleeds into the capitalistic mindset, but that's another episode.
But it's comes from aspects of religion, right?
It does.
There's not many religions, certainly the Abrahamic ones, and I'm not so sure of the polytheistic. My partner's family are Hindu, and they do have a lot of female gods. And
so do Norse pagans, so do Greek mythology. Greek mythology is big on women. The goddess Hera, she's Zeus's wife, and then you have Aphrodite, you have Gaia, who's the earth, what I would say is our mother earth, and then you have powerful goddesses like Artemis, who is a huntress, and then you have Athena, who's a goddess of wisdom. In Norse paganism, most gods are a god of something and war. Okay, because war and battle,
that's the constant, isn't it?
Yes, war and battle were a big part of Norse culture, and Norway and Iceland still really value those parts of Norse paganism and those parts of history. A lot of it, unfortunately, has not been untouched by Christians. The modern Eddas and all that were translated by Christian peoples.
you for being on MiND Stim. And we could talk for hours. I think this is a really cool episode, Jill. I could talk to you for days. So come back, host an episode if you want. Any last thing you want to say to the audience?
Currently, I work for a nonprofit. It's a military-driven nonprofit called Blue Star Families. We look to change the way that America views and supports its military. There is obviously digital marketing. My big boss, Ryan, started to mentor me in growth marketing, which is an area I've hardly touched in my career. I find I have a knack for it. I write a lot of different blogs. I do a lot of our messaging for members. Some of the work I'm really proud of is I started a virtual D&D event that we do periodically, and it's wildly successful. We've also found that it brings together pretty much every generation, from kids to older veterans.
I've known Jill for probably about a year on and off. I think that we'll be working together really soon. I want you to come on the podcast more often. Hopefully next time I don't mistake Compton for Delaware, right? So it just goes to show we are off the cuff here, and you get what you get, really. But you've been an amazing guest. Let's keep in touch.